Alright, so I need your guys' opinion about something. Beard or no beard? I didn't shave it all November, and now I'm actually kind of liking it with how long the hair is right now, but you guys are the ones who have to look at my face most often, so I figured I'd ask. One of the few things that you guys might have noticed I didn't find some reason to complain about when reviewing the previous Teen Titans episode that I covered, Fractured, was the fact that that episode broke up the conclusion to Terra's story arc. And we see why I didn't complain about that at the very start of this episode. As the very start of this episode, at least the first time that we see the Titans at the start of this episode, makes it very clear that time has passed since Terra has left. A significant enough amount of time that even Beast Boy seems to be in pretty good spirits. There is a little bit of stinger at the very beginning of the episode where we see that Terra is super dedicated towards defeating the Titans, but I don't really feel the need to comment on that. It's really only there to serve as a reminder for the audience that this is where Terra is now. In fact, Terra doesn't really get what I consider meaningful development anywhere in this entire episode, but we'll talk about that as the review goes on. So anyway, the Titans are driving around in the T-car, and they're having a pretty good time. Beast Boy is telling jokes, trying to get Raven to smile. Everybody else is just kind of laughing at him, except for Starfire, who just doesn't get the jokes at all. It's an amusing scene, which does a good job of reminding us of each of these characters' personalities, and honestly, if this had been the first time we had ever seen the Titans, I think this would have been a really good introduction to who they are as people. But then Terra shows up. She wrecks the T-car really violently by tossing a huge boulder at it and basically T-boning it. Like, the way that the episode kind of cuts to silence there while all of the Teen Titans pick themselves up out of the car painfully. It had a realness to it that most scenes in this show don't have. And then there she is, standing there to confront them, and they all fight against her. And she knows them well enough at this point that, much like how Robin was able to counter most of their abilities when he was Slade's apprentice, she's able to pick them apart pretty well. Even injuring Raven to the point that she can't get back to her feet on her own. Like, Starfire is able to momentarily overpower her, but then she remembers that she actually likes and cares about Terra, and so hesitates long enough for Terra to get the best of her, and that happens all throughout this fight. You see at different points throughout this fight, various Titans are hesitating just long enough for Terra to get a leg up on them. And you kind of get the sense that that's what Terra is here to do. She's here to probe exactly how much they still care about her and also test herself against their various abilities. Because there's no way that confronting them in the street, in the middle of the city, in this unsubtle of a way, is Slade and Terra's endgame. We also see that regardless of how much this was a test for Terra herself, this is also a test for Slade. He's apparently built a neural interface into the new costume that she's wearing, specifically into the little Slade logo on the chest, that allows him to, in some limited capacity at least, control her actions or influence her actions, adding his strengths and his intellect to her fighting style. He's even able to derive new uses for her abilities. She's able to summon these golem-like creatures out of the ground that really give the Titans a lot of trouble. Enough so that Robin realizes they're causing a lot of damage and taking a lot of damage trying to bring her down, and maybe they should back off. They go and regroup at their heavily fortified tower, which I'm sure they have changed all of the security codes for so that Terra can't override them the way that she did in her last appearance, to discuss matters, and they're all very vocal about the fact that they weren't able to just finish her off when they had the opportunity. Terra banked on Cyborg hesitating before shooting her with his cannon, for example, and she was able to anticipate that she'd be able to trick Starfire into being worried for her safety. I don't know if they actually realized that that's what Terra was doing, that she was probing for weaknesses in their emotional states, but they definitely realized their own shortcomings in the battle. This isn't something they're going to let happen again, is my point. At least not while they're all working together, but Slade knows that. Because now that Terra knows how to best attack them emotionally, and now that she knows which of them will give her the most trouble in a physical confrontation, they can build a plan around taking the Titans down one by one and eliminating them as a problem once and for all. They make it look like Slade has some sort of plan to bring together all of his past monstrous allies, Plasmus, Overload, and Cinderblock, for some nefarious robbery scheme, or maybe even some tech assembly scheme like he's pulled off in the past before. Like, Terra even goes out of her way to break them out of prison in as ostentatious a way as possible, making it absolutely obvious that she's the one who did it. So that the Titans, when they respond to this, will think that they're responding to just another stage of Slade's plan and not the final stage, or at least what he thinks will be the final stage. They don't realize that this is Terra's big move, that this is the opportunity where she's going to take the opportunity to take them each out. So they split up, Raven going off on her own to deal with Overload, Cyborg and Beast Boy going after Plasma, and Robin and Starfire going after Cinderblock. They're thrown a little off their game when none of their opponents are behaving quite like they normally do, since Slade is interfacing with them through those little chess symbols as well, giving them added persistence and even also helping them find new uses for their powers, just as he did for Terra. But they defeat their opponents fairly handily, only for Terra to swoop in after the fact and take each of them down. The only thing I don't really understand about her and Slade's plan is they leave Robin for last, despite the fact that Slade has a lot of respect for Robin's abilities. I do, however, agree with their choice to go after Raven first, since her powers are comparably strong to Terra's, and she also has a comparable amount of nuance in the way that she can use them. And so yeah, she goes after Raven first, filling the room in which Raven fought Overload with mud, so that she has plenty of ammo to work with. And they fight, and it's a short fight. It's shorter than I remember it from back when I watched this episode the first time, but it's a really good fight. It's a really short and sweet superpower fight, one of the best superpower fights in at least these first two seasons, especially out of like the one-on-one fights that we've seen so far. And it really does seem like Raven might be able to win, but all throughout the episode, while Beast Boy has been trying to rationalize Terra's actions and convince his friends to try and save her, we've seen that Raven has been trying to rationalize away the trust that she showed Terra, to convince herself that Terra didn't actually convince Raven to trust her the way that we know that she did. She's denying that she formed an emotional attachment with this person because she knows that if she doesn't, she'll get angry and she'll lose control, and Terra recognizes this as well. She picks at that, gets Raven angry, and Raven goes berserk. Briefly, she overpowers Terra with the added strength that this gives her, but without that extra control that having control over her emotions gives her, Terra is able to overwhelm her in the end and bury her underground. In a truly horrifying scene which leaves you with the impression that Raven might have just drowned. She then goes for Starfire, the next most legitimate direct threat to her own power, knocking her out and dropping her into the ocean unconscious, where she will probably also drown. And then she takes on Beast Boy and Cyborg directly, dropping both of them into a trench in the earth and then closing the trench behind them. This leaves Robin, who comes for her himself directly, even surprising her. Like, you get the impression that neither she nor Slade expected him to show up as soon as he did, but she manages to defeat him too, taking advantage of the fact that he respected Beast Boy's wishes to give her one last chance to come back around, and that causes him to hesitate just enough that she's able to push him back, because he's been keeping in close quarters with her since her powers don't really work well in close quarters. She's able to push him back and overwhelm him pretty much instantly. And the episode ends with she and Slade seemingly thinking that all of the Titans are dealt with, but the Titans somehow managed to survive, and they've regrouped somewhere underground, and now they are convinced that there is no saving Terra and they need to come at her with everything they have. Even Beast Boy is right there with them, as he has at this point seen Terra do some horrible things, and she has said some pretty horrible things to him, making it very clear that at the very least, she's convinced herself that she was never actually their friend. You may have noticed that I'm not putting this review with the review of the next episode, despite the fact that Aftershock parts 1 and 2 are 2 parts of a 2-part episode. And that's because they don't feel like they're the same episode. This episode feels like build-up and preparation towards what is the proper climax to this season. They don't feel like a 2-part, 2-episode-long climax that meshes together super well. No, you really do feel like that just as time passed between Terra's previous appearance and this one, time is going to pass again before we see the Titans confront her for the final time. And what really hammers that sensation home is that the emotional journey of one of the two characters who have been going through an emotional journey because of all this Terra stuff seems to be completed here. Terra has affected most out of these 5 characters, Raven and Beast Boy, and Raven's emotional journey seems to end here when she's able to admit to Terra and to herself that she really did believe that Terra was her friend, that she opened up, despite the fact that she doesn't open up specifically to avoid things like this, and trusted Terra not just not to betray her, but also not to hurt her in this very personal way. And Terra hurt her anyway. You can really tell that as much as she's trying to convince herself that Terra never tricked her for the benefit of how she uses her powers, that she's also doing it as a defense mechanism, because if she admits that Terra was able to take advantage of her in this way, it will make her doubt all of the friendships she's built up to this point, and all of the friendships that she might be able to build in the future, and that's not something that she wants to happen to herself. Meanwhile, Beast Boy's emotional journey seems to come to a head by the end of the episode, setting up for its climax in the next one. But aside from the fact that this episode is used to get all the characters to where they need to be for the next episode to happen, this episode doesn't really seem to feed into the next episode any more than any of these other semi-serialized episodes of the show feed into the next. All of that said, though, this is still a really good episode. It's really heavy with the emotional stuff. Like, I'm really happy that they did pick just a couple of the Titans to really focus on in terms of how Terra affected them emotionally, because it keeps the story from being bogged down by trying to give everybody some obvious emotional arc relating to this plotline. It keeps things simple so that they can be streamlined and kept more effective. I mentioned that Terra doesn't really go through any character development in this episode, but that's fine, as it serves to keep this episode more detached from the next one, and also allows the writers to relegate all of that to the next episode so that the resolution to her character arc can be parallel to Beast Boy's. And because she doesn't really develop here, and because we don't really get anything from her point of view throughout this episode, by the end, as a viewer, you're pretty much right there with the Titans, convinced that she really is as evil as she's pretending to be, if she's even pretending at all. You are left just as willing to hate her and just as ready to see her taken down as the Titans themselves are, but maybe if the writing has been as effective as the writers were hoping that it was, there's still some part of you that is trying to deny that you feel that way. Some part of you that still considers Terra a good person and would like to see her rejoin the team. And so you really are, at the end of this episode, left right there with the Titans, feeling what the Titans themselves are feeling. And that is a really good thing. That's some really good writing. If I had to nitpick anything in this episode at all, it's that they never explain how Slade is able to give people additional powers through the neural interface thing, but I do have a theory about that just the fact that he is so smart and that he has dealt with so many superpowered beings over the course of his life, it allows him to see new ways that a superpowered being's powers might be used that maybe they haven't even worked out for themselves yet. And he's able to take advantage of that. It's the only thing I can think of, though, because it doesn't make sense that just linking his brain with theirs would give them more abilities. New skills, definitely, because he's an incredibly skilled person, but not new abilities. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense without rationalizing it in some different way. Also, Slade himself doesn't really have that big of a part in this episode, which I do think was kind of a bummer. I would like to have seen some more build-up of his side of things somewhere in here, but I don't know where they would have fit that, so whatever. All that said, though, guys, if you have seen Aftershock Part 1, the first part of the 2-part finale of the second season of Teen Titans, what did you think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.